Hi there, friend. My name is John Werner. I used to be a part of the largest cult in the United States. After studying the Bible, Christian history, and ministry, I set my sights on confronting the problematic nature of white evangelicalism in the United States. In 2019, I published my first book as a first step in addressing the subtle issues of this complex system. This podcast will continue that work under the same title. Welcome to The Cult of Christianity.
The Old Testament is replete with accounts of war, from detailed battle reports to discussions of the motivations and justifications for warfare. However, what many biblical scholars emphasize in modern times is a question of historicity. The stories of war in the Old Testament are not often historically accurate, but are more folklore than literal. For example, we can take a closer look at the book of Joshua, which tells the story of a swift and complete victory of a united Israelite army. However, when we compare this with other accounts in the book of Judges, we find a different narrative, one of a gradual, partial conquest by individual tribes, marred by many defeats. Some stories, like the war against the Midianites found in Numbers 31, are widely believed not to have happened as narrated. However, sometimes accounts in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament contain the only known accounts of a battle, while others are attested to in extra biblical sources. What's fascinating is that these accounts of war in the Old Testament have far-reaching implications for understanding the Christian perspective on current events, like the ongoing conflicts in Israel. While the Bible contains these stories of warfare, many scholars view them as symbolic and not necessarily literal historical events. So what can we glean from these myths of war in the Old Testament? How do they shape Christian viewpoints on the contemporary situation in Israel, and why does the cult of Christianity seem to have an allegiance to a region and religion that competes with their own? First, we must understand, as best we can, that this section of the world is a cluster of unresolved conflict, and a lot of the blame is on white people. In 1947, the region of Palestine situated in the Middle East was under British control. Within its borders, Jewish and Arab communities coexisted. At that time, the United Nations proposed a plan to divide Palestine into two distinct states, one for the Jewish population and one for the Arab population, while taking special care of the city of Jerusalem. The local Jewish community accepted the plan, but the Arab community rejected it. And on May 14th, 1948, Israel declared independence. Neighboring Arab nations like Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon reacted by invading the area, sparking the first Arab-Israeli war. During this period, the All-Palestine government was formed by the Arab League to govern Gaza Strip. Fast forward to when Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, a strong advocate for pan-Arab nationalism, came to power. He had a hostile stance toward Israel. In 1956, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, a crucial waterway connecting Europe and Asia, largely owned by French and British interests. France and Britain responded by making a secret agreement with Israel. Israel would invade Egypt as they were blocked from using the canal, and their southern port of Eilat was shut down by Egypt, France, and Britain would then step in, pretending to be peacemakers, and take control of the canal. In October 1956, Israel invaded Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. In just 5 days, they captured Gaza, Rafah, and Al-Arish, taking thousands of prisoners and occupying most of the peninsula east of the Suez Canal. This gave Israel access to open sea routes through the Gulf of Aqaba. In December, after the joint Anglo-French intervention, a UN emergency force was placed in the area, and Israeli forces withdrew in March 1957. 10 years later, in June 1967, Arab and Israeli forces clashed in what is known as the 6 Days War, which took place from June 5th to June 10th. Tensions had been escalating, with Syria intensifying its attacks on Israeli villages from positions in the Golan Heights early in 1967. After the Israeli Air Force shot down 6 Syrian fighter jets, in response, Egyptian President Nasser moved his forces close to the Sinai border, expelled the UN peacekeeping force in the region, and sought to blockade the Israeli port of Eilat. In May 1967, Egypt signed a mutual defense pact with Jordan. In response to what appeared to be a rush to war by Arab nations, Israel launched a sudden and decisive air assault, destroying Egypt's air force on the ground. The Israeli victory on the ground was equally remarkable. They pushed back Syrian forces from the Golan Heights, took control of the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, and forced Jordanian forces out of the West Bank. Of great significance, Israel was left in sole control of Jerusalem. The years following the 6-Day War saw more conflict, culminating in the dramatic Yom Kippur War of 1973. In the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur, Egyptian and Syrian forces caught Israel off guard by crossing the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights, respectively. The Arab armies demonstrated greater determination and fighting capability, inflicting significant losses on Israeli forces. Israel, however, made a strong recovery, pushing into Syrian territory and surrounding the Egyptian Third Army by crossing the Suez Canal. Yet, they couldn't fully regain the formidable fortifications along the Suez Canal destroyed by Egypt in the initial stages. The war ended in October following a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Egypt in November and with Syria in May 1974. An agreement led to Israeli withdrawal from the Sinai Peninsula west of Mitla and Gidi passes, and Egypt reduced its forces on the canal's east bank. A UN peacekeeping force monitored the area. A pivotal moment came in 1979 when Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty, formally ending their 30-year state of war. Israel returned the entire Sinai Peninsula to Egypt, and Egypt recognized Israel's right to exist. Both nations established normal diplomatic relations, marking a significant step towards peace, at least between those two countries. In 1982, less than 6 weeks after Israel's withdrawal from the Sinai Peninsula, rising tensions between Israelis and Palestinians led to a significant event known as the Lebanon War. It began with Israeli air raids on Beirut and southern Lebanon, where the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, had strongholds. The day after these air raids, Israel launched a full-scale invasion of Lebanon, and by June 14th, their ground forces reached the outskirts of Beirut, effectively encircling the city. Amidst intense negotiations, and after heavy Israeli shelling of West Beirut, the PLO eventually left the city under the supervision of a multinational force. Israeli troops later withdrew from West Beirut, and by June 1985, the Israeli army had completely left Lebanon. Then, 20 years later, in July 2006, a major conflict erupted known as the Second Lebanon War. Hezbollah, a militant group based in Lebanon, initiated an operation against Israel with the goal of pressuring Israel to release Lebanese prisoners. During this operation, they killed some Israeli soldiers and captured 2 of them. In response, Israel launched a military offensive into southern Lebanon to rescue the captured soldiers. This war lasted for 34 days, resulting in significant devastation. It left over 1,000 Lebanese people dead, and approximately 1 million were displaced from their homes. While it's worth noting that some Arab leaders criticize Hezbollah for provoking this conflict, their ability to hold their ground against the Israeli Defense Forces earned them respect in various parts of the Arab world. And now the current state of Palestine is recognized by 138 out of the 193 United Nations member states. However, it does not have full control over the territory it claims. The West Bank is divided into different areas, with some under Palestinian control and others under full Israeli authority. The Gaza Strip is ruled by the militant Islamic group Hamas and has faced a long-term blockade by Egypt and Israel since 2007. These conflicts, spanning generations, are woven with the intricate threads of religion, identity, and nationalism, further complicating the quest for lasting peace in that region of the world. The alleged Holy Land holds profound significance for multiple faiths, especially for Judaism and Islam, making Jerusalem a focal point of religious devotion and a frequent flashpoint in the struggles for control. At its core, these conflicts stem from deeply entrenched identity issues, with both Israelis and Palestinians laying claim to the same land as their ancestral homeland. Nationalism, too, plays a pivotal role, with each side fervently advocating for their own sovereign state and the preservation of their cultural and national heritage. The entanglement of religious fervor, identity, and nationalism has rendered these disputes enduring and exhausting, offering no easy path to reconciliation. So, let's break down the current situation. At time of recording, Israel has officially declared war on the Palestinian militant group Hamas. This declaration comes in response to a significant, well-coordinated attack by Hamas, which involved air, sea, and land operations. The aftermath of this large-scale assault is grim, with over 1,000 casualties in Israel, leading to retaliatory Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, resulting in at least 900 deaths. The situation is further complicated as Hamas claims to have taken around 100 hostages and threatens to harm them if Gaza continues to be targeted. Israel is vowing to make Hamas pay for these actions and is even considering a potential ground incursion into Gaza. Let's break that down further. On October 7th, militants from Gaza fired thousands of rockets into Israeli towns. They also managed to breach the heavily fortified border fence with Israel, sending Hamas gunmen deep into Israeli territory. The result was tragic, with hundreds of lives lost, including civilians and soldiers, and women, children included, and the taking of hostages. It took Israeli forces over 2 days of intense street battles to regain control. On Monday, the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, reported that they had successfully retaken control of all Israeli communities near Gaza's southern border. Notably, Israel had not experienced adversaries engaging in street battles on its own territory since the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, where this all started. And furthermore, it was a significant terror attack that claimed many civilian lives. Hamas had previously kidnapped Israelis, but never had taken so many hostages at once, including children and the elderly. Hamas dubbed this operation Al-Aqsa Storm, which is citing an event that took place in September when a 44-year-old Palestinian woman attempted to stab an Israeli border guard at the Al-Aqsa Mosque gate in Jerusalem, resulting in her arrest by Israeli security forces. Eyewitnesses reported that she was brutally beaten during the arrest, leading to protest by local Palestinians. Israeli settlers, led by extremist American Israeli Rabbi Yehuda Glick, also stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, a site considered the third holiest in Islam, prompting increased tensions in the area. The compound has been a recurring flashpoint, with some extremist Israeli activists seeking to replace the mosque with a temple, despite the decades-old status quo allowing Jewish visits but not religious rites there. these extremists stormed the mosque and did their prayers there in order to show the Muslims who's boss. In response to the more recent Hamas attack, Israel declared war and initiated Operation Swords of Iron, which involves striking suspected Hamas and Islamic Jihad targets in Gaza. As of Monday, hundreds, including dozens of children, had lost their lives in Gaza. The IDF urged Gaza civilians to leave their residential areas immediately for their safety as Israeli military operations against Hamas continue. The sophisticated and well-coordinated nature of this Hamas operation has led to speculation of potential foreign assistance. Such external involvement could escalate the situation into a broader regional conflict. Israel claims that Iran provided substantial support to Hamas with an annual sum of around $100 million. The United States also thinks that Iran offers funding, weapons, and training to Hamas. Israel, among its immediate neighbors, has peace agreements with Jordan and Egypt. However, it remains in a state of war with Lebanon and Syria. Israel is prepared to defend itself against possible attacks from those two countries. Lebanon's Hezbollah, backed by Iran, has shown support for Hamas' attack and claimed responsibility for targeting Israeli sites near the Israeli-occupied Shebaa Farms area, to which Israel responded with artillery fire. So far, as of time of recording, the United States has deployed a carrier strike group to the eastern Mediterranean Sea and sent additional fighter jets to the Middle East. This move is aimed at deterring potential Iranian aggression and preventing this conflict from spreading beyond Israel's borders. Iran's president initially congratulated the Palestinian people for their victory over Israel, but later stated that Iran was not directly involved in the attack and attributed it solely to Palestine itself. So what does this have to do with the wars in the Old Testament? In some ways, nothing. In some ways, everything. Within these texts, we uncover more than just tales of battles and conquest. They serve as tools ingeniously employed for the purposes of identity formation and the perpetuation of an us versus them mentality. Consider the iconic story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. It is not merely an account of military victory, but a carefully crafted story meant to solidify the identity of the Israelites as a chosen people with divine favor. A narrative of triumph that defines a people as on the side of the Lord. Throughout these texts, divine intervention takes center stage. Think of Gideon, an ordinary leader guided by an angelic figure to victory. When Gideon is called by God to lead the Israelites against the Midianites, he starts with a sizable army of thousands of men. However, in a test of faith, God instructs Gideon to reduce his army to a mere 300 soldiers. To accomplish this, Gideon gathers his troops at a nearby spring. Then he provides a unique challenge. The men are instructed to drink water from the spring. Based on how the soldiers choose to drink, Gideon makes his selection. Those who kneel down and drink directly from the spring are set aside, while those who cup the water in their hands to drink are chosen for battle. A remarkable aspect of the story is the moment when, as a sign from God, the sun and the moon stand still in the sky, prolonging daylight to aid Gideon's army in the pursuit of the fleeing enemy. And this event symbolizes divine intervention in Gideon's favor. And beneath this surface, these stories are obvious allegories. Take David and Goliath, for instance. It's not just a story of a young shepherd defeating a giant. It's a parable about conquering despite overwhelming odds. These tales are cornerstones that bolster the identity of the Israelites. Yet here's where it gets intriguing. These narratives do more than create a sense of identity. They build walls. An us versus them mentality emerges as the Old Testament contrasts the Israelites with other nations. Often these others are portrayed as enemies, setting the Israelites apart, emphasizing their distinctiveness and underscoring their divine sanction. It's vital to approach these narratives with a critical lens. While they may seem to impart moral lessons, they glorify violence as an acceptable means to an end. And in the end, the Old Testament myths are multifaceted tools, instruments for identity formation and moral instructions. They shape the collective identity. But is Islam so different? Stories from the Quran aren't just tales of battles and conflicts. They play a crucial role in shaping Muslim identity, providing a profound glimpse into the faith, moral principles, and historical consciousness of Muslims around the world. For example, take the Battle of Badr, a historic event from the early days of Islam. Imagine a small band of 300 Muslims facing off against a formidable Meccan force. It's a classic David v. Goliath scenario. Through divine intervention and unwavering faith, the Muslims achieve an incredible victory. This story embodies the Quranic message that with trust in God and steadfast faith, Muslims can triumph against all odds. The Battle of Uhud, a pivotal event in early Islamic history, occurs in 625 CE and serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of disobedience, arrogance, and the absence of humility. During the battle, the Prophet Muhammad positioned archers on a hill to protect the Muslim rear with strict orders not to leave their post. However, some archers, thinking the battle was won, disobeyed the Prophet's instructions to collect the spoils of war. This disobedience allowed the Quraysh to launch a surprise attack, turning the tide of the battle against the Muslims. This narrative plays a crucial role in shaping a strong and unified Muslim identity, emphasizing the need to follow divine guidance and leadership without question. And these stories also contribute to the us versus them mentality, where Muslims are portrayed as the faithful believers facing various challenges, and all external forces are adversaries. It reinforces the idea of a ummah, a global community of Muslims united by faith and loyalty to God. The Quranic narratives about war also emphasize the moral aspects of conflict. They lay down the rules of engagement, set guidelines for the treatment of prisoners, and highlight the importance of protecting non-combatants. Hence, many claim Islam is the religion of peace because of how they do war. But you'd be hard-pressed to take a side when it comes to current Middle East conflicts. It seems all sides have committed atrocities to such a degree that supporting any group feels like an endorsement of war crimes. Unless, of course, you're a Christian. And Christian Zionism is, in essence, a belief among many Christians that the Jewish people should go back to their Holy Land, which is, in their mind, Israel. They think this is all part of a big plan laid out in the Bible. They believe that when the Jews return to Israel, it's a sign that Jesus Christ is on his way back for his second coming. The idea started becoming popular in the 20th century, replacing another term called Christian restorationism. But it has much older roots, dating back to the 17th century in England, primarily among Protestant groups. The twist here is that while these Christians support Jews going back to Israel, they also hope that the Jewish people will convert to Christianity when they get there to fulfill prophecies or perceived prophecies, I should say, in the Bible. Now, some Jews have been skeptical of these Christian supporters, wondering if they have their best interests at heart. After all, it's kind of like saying, sure, go back to your homeland, but only if you switch religions. It doesn't make a ton of sense. And Christian Zionism got more attention during the English Civil War and then made its way to North America with early settlers, especially the Puritans. And fast forward to the 18th century, and you have this new wave of Christians who are really into the idea of Jews returning to Israel. This belief became particularly popular with the rise of evangelical Protestantism, with leaders like John Wesley getting on board. And the bottom line is that it's all about religious beliefs and how Christians relate to the Jewish people in Israel. And when you peel back the curtain, it's actually quite dehumanizing, and it got really pervasive after 9/11. Because after the World Trade Center attacks, there was a noticeable shift in American Christianity, particularly within evangelical and fundamentalist circles. This shift saw an increased prominence of Christian Zionism in American Christianity. Many evangelicals interpreted the 9/11 attacks as a sign of the imminent return of Jesus Christ. They believed that the restoration of Israel was a crucial element of biblical prophecy, and therefore they became vocal supporters of the state of Israel almost overnight, even if they had no opinion previously. As a result, American foreign policy became more pro-Israel after 9/11, with many evangelicals supporting this approach. They saw a strong alliance with Israel as both politically strategic and divinely mandated. And in the wake of 9/11, conservative Christians became more vocal about their moral and religious values. They framed support for Israel as a moral duty in a world they viewed as increasingly hostile to the Christian faith. Prominent televangelists and Christian broadcasters played a significant role in spreading Christian Zionist ideals, portraying Israel as the righteous underdog in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Groups like Christians United for Israel, CUFI, gained traction after 9/11, lobbying for pro-Israel policies and garnering support from millions of Americans who identified with their cause. Many American churches organized tours to Israel, connecting believers directly to the Holy Land. And those visits solidified the support for Israel and reinforced the belief in the significance of the Jewish state. So, Christianity, at least in the US, overwhelmingly supports Israel, not because they are informed and think Israel is the more moral body, but because they identify with Israel. Israel recognizes the political and economic benefits of this support, as evangelicals constitute a significant and influential voting bloc in the United States. They have consistently supported policies that favor Israel, such as recognizing Jerusalem as the capital and promoting strong U.S.-Israel relations. This evangelical backing bolsters Israel's position on the global stage and aligns with its political objectives, making it a source of satisfaction for the Israeli government. But with all this talk of culture, politics, religion, holy lands, holy books, and of course war, what gets lost in the conversation? How evil war truly is. War, an enduring and tragic facet of human history, is often driven by a complex web of motivations, including territorial disputes, ideological differences, but most importantly, perhaps, the pursuit of power. And one aspect that frequently goes unnoticed is the profound connection between war and narcissism, particularly when it manifests within the context of nationalism. Narcissism, a psychological concept, revolves around an excessive sense of self-importance, a constant need for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. When we bring narcissism into the context of war, it is not uncommon to find leaders who display grandiose behavior and an insatiable appetite for recognition and power and blood. The convergence of individual narcissism with collective narcissism, also known as nationalism or exceptionalism, can give rise to a perilous synergy that can ignite conflicts and foster warfare. And nationalism, a potent ideology that prioritizes a nation's interests and identity above all else, frequently relies on charismatic leaders who can stoke nationalistic sentiments within the population. These leaders exhibit narcissistic tendencies as they seek personal glory and greatness by elevating their nation on the world stage. Adolf Hitler, the leader of Nazi Germany, serves as the epitome of this connection. His grandiose visions of a greater Germany and the Aryan race propelled the nation into World War II, resulting in widespread suffering and devastation. Hitler's narcissistic quest for supremacy found fertile ground in nationalism. that he propagated. And narcissistic leaders exploit nationalism as a tool to manipulate the masses. They present themselves as saviors of the nation, promising glory, dominance, and the realization of nationalistic dreams. This manipulation often entails dehumanizing perceived enemies and rationalizing aggressive actions as acts of self-defense or national honor. The lead up to the Iraq War in 2003 stands as a contemporary illustration of this phenomenon. The U.S. administration, led by President George W. Bush, leveraged nationalist sentiments following the 9/11 attacks to justify a crazy invasion, invoking the specter of weapons of mass destruction, and the war ultimately proved to be founded on a false premise, and it resulted in well over 250,000 deaths. Collective narcissism, which involves a shared belief in the superiority of one's national group, leads individuals to perceive their nation as uniquely deserving of success, protection, and recognition. When combined with a narcissistic leader, this group identity is weaponized to validate aggression and conquest. And narcissistic nationalism yields catastrophic consequences, not only for the nations involved, but just for global stability and security. Wars driven by these leaders and collective narcissism often become protracted, brutal conflicts resistant to any suggestion of peaceful resolution. War serves as a manifestation of narcissism and nationalism, weaving together the excessive self-importance of leaders with the collective narcissism we all share in our respective nations. It is this narcissistic exceptionalism that Christianity breeds and wallows in and rejoices about shamelessly. And the connection between Christianity and Judaism is like two branches from the same tree, each reaching for the sun, but growing in different directions. They both have roots in ancient stories and traditions, and they read a similar, though certainly not identical book, but always tell their stories in different ways. But where they overlap can be the most toxic Venn diagram. Both Christian nationalism, particularly in the United States, and Zionism in Israel share common threads of religious fervor, historical claims to specific territories, and a vision of exclusive national identity. Christian nationalism, spoken or unspoken, seeks a Christian-based government. Central to this ideology is a cult-like devotion to their faith, with many proponents viewing the United States as a Christian nation founded upon divine principles. And Zionism is grounded in Jewish religion and religious and historical ties to the land of Israel, particularly Jerusalem. It envisions the return of Jewish people to their ancestral homeland as promised in religious texts, including in the Hebrew Bible. And Zionism finds its roots in Jewish religious identity. Christian nationalists in the United States believe that the nation's land and government should be underpinned by Christian values. They assert historical claims to the United States based on the arrival of early Christian settlers and the belief that divine providence played a role in the country's foundation. And Zionism seeks to reestablish Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. It's grounded in the historical connection of Jewish people to the region, where the first and second temples once stood, and Zionists claim territorial rights based on ancient Jewish presence in the land. Christian nationalists advocate for a homogeneous national identity, where the Christian faith plays a center role in defining citizenship. They argue for policies that prioritize Christian customs, Christian values, and Christian symbols in the public sphere. Zionism promotes Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people, emphasizing a unique connection between Jewish identity and the state's character. It has sparked debates about the place of non-Jewish citizens in the Israeli national identity. Christian nationalism in the United States has historical roots dating back to the Puritans and the early settlers who believed they had a divine mission to the world. These historical myths have been influential in shaping contemporary ideologies here. And Zionism has its origins in the late 19th century with Theodor Herzl being a key figure in the movement. Zionists cited historical claims to the land of Israel in the pursuit of a Jewish homeland, and both Christian nationalism and Zionism have had considerable political impact. In the United States, Christian nationalists have influenced policy decisions and elections. In Israel, Zionist parties have played pivotal roles in shaping the country's entire landscape. And Christian nationalism and Zionism are similar in the worst ways, including their religious foundations, territorial claims, visions of exclusive national identity, historical parallels, and political influence. So war, what is it good for? The answer is pretty simple. Making yourself feel holy. And it's a tale as old as time. Holy wars, sometimes called religious wars or crusades, are conflicts driven by religious motivation, often with the goal of securing sacred lands or defending faith or advancing a religious cause. And these wars are a staple of human history, influencing empires, shaping cultures, and changing religious traditions. Let's go to the Byzantine Arab Wars of the 7th to 11th centuries, a time when two great empires clashed over faith and lands in the heart of the Eastern Mediterranean. The Byzantine Empire, the guardians of Eastern Christianity, stood against the emerging Islamic caliphates, a new force of the Islamic faith. And these wars, driven by religious rivalries and territorial disputes, played out amid theological debates and fervent faith. At the Battle of Yarmouk in 636 CE, Arab forces led by Khalid ibn al-Walid secured a decisive victory, setting the stage for the Arab conquest of Syria and Palestine. Yet the Byzantines held strong during the siege of Constantinople in 717 through 718, protecting their capital from the Umayyad Caliphate. Over time, the Byzantine Arab Wars led to the spread of Islamic culture in the region, reshaping the course of history and paving the way for the complex interactions between Christianity and Islam. Now let's fast forward to the Iberian Peninsula in the 8th to 15th centuries, where the Reconquista, a Christian crusade, aimed to capture Spain and Portugal from Islamic rule. As the Moors, of North African origin, established a vibrant Islamic civilization in the region, Christian kingdoms in the north launched a long and determined quest to reclaim their lands. These Christian rulers, filled with religious fervor, viewed the Reconquista as a divine mission to liberate their territories from Muslim rule. Their efforts weren't without results. The Battle of Covadonga in 722 marked the beginning, as Christian forces achieved a significant victory. Capturing Toledo in 1085 was another significant milestone, as Christian kingdoms steadily pushed southward, taking back what they perceived as their territories. And finally, the Reconquista reached its climax in 1492, when Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs, captured Granada, marking the end of Islamic rule in the Iberian Peninsula. This victory shaped the cultural and religious landscape, birthing a distinct Spanish identity influenced by centuries of Islamic, Christian, and Jewish interactions. Then there were what are more commonly known as the Christian Crusades. These holy wars, sanctioned by the church, were a defining aspect of medieval Europe, driven by religious zeal and territorial ambitions. The First Crusade, ignited by Pope Urban II in 1096, was a watershed moment in history. The Pope's call to arms aimed to recapture Jerusalem from Muslim control. Thousands of Christians from across Europe responded to this summons, embarking on a grueling and perilous journey to the Holy Land. And their motivation was deeply rooted in faith, viewing the liberation of Jerusalem as a sacred duty. And the First Crusade brought about the capture of Jerusalem in 1099, and Christian kingdoms were established in the Levant. Yet this success was marred by brutality and bloodshed. Simultaneous to the Reconquista, the Baltic Crusades raged on in the northern territories, aiming to Christianize the pagan Baltic peoples. And these campaigns, conducted primarily by Teutonic order, were marked by religious zeal and territorial expansion. By the 13th century, Christianity had made significant inroads in the Baltic regions, and the Christian Crusades were atrocious, killing at least 2 million people, possibly up to 5 times higher than that, a significant percentage of the population. And then there were the Islamic holy wars, and these conflicts were in response to these Christian crusades. During the 12th and 13th centuries, as the Christian crusaders sought to extend their dominion in the Levant, Islamic leaders like Saladin emerged as beacons of Muslim resistance. The tide of holy wars from both sides continued to ebb and flow, influencing the Middle East socio-political landscape. Saladin's campaigns are often regarded as a symbol of Islamic unity and resistance against the Crusaders, and they played a pivotal role in the ongoing holy wars of the era. The 14th to the 17th centuries witnessed the expansive reach of the Ottoman Empire, marked by religious conquest, especially in Eastern Europe. The Ottomans' march through history was deeply intertwined with their Islamic identity, and their expansion was seen as a form of holy war. The year 1453 saw a monumental event when Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire, fell to the Ottomans. And this marked a significant moment in the context of Islamic holy wars, as the city's conquest symbolized the meeting of two giant civilizations. And less talked about than this time period is also the Reformation Wars, a tumultuous period in Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries. And these conflicts sprang from the Protestant Reformation, the religious revolution that shattered the religious unity of the Catholic Church. The rise of Protestantism brought with it a wave of religious and political tensions that would erupt in full-scale wars. The wars of religion, as they became known, were driven by differing religious beliefs and not much else besides maybe a thirst of power. And one of the most devastating chapters of the wars of religion was the 30 Years' War, which raged from 1618 to 1648. It engulfed much of Europe and left a trail of destruction in its wake. This also marked a shift from humans fighting about land to humans fighting more about ideology. And the death toll from that war was at least 4 million. And we haven't even touched the history of Hindu and Sikh holy wars, which unfolded in the Indian subcontinent during the 17th and 19th centuries. The Maratha Mughal Wars, spanning the 17th and 18th centuries, were marked by religious conflicts between the Hindu Marathas and the powerful Mughal Empire. These wars were driven by a complex interplay of religious divisions and territorial ambitions. The Marathas, predominantly Hindu, sought to challenge Mughal dominance and protect their religious and regional interest. Later were the Sikh Wars in the 18th and 19th century. These conflicts were rooted in Sikh resistance against the British East Indian Company's expanding influence in India. Sikh identity and the preservation of their religious values played a central role in these wars. The Sikh community recognized the threat to their faith and sovereignty, engaged in these battles with fierce determination to safeguard their religious heritage. And of course, now we have the never-ending Israeli-Arab conflict, the fight for freedom of Palestine, the nationalism of Israel, and Christians ignorantly supporting results they think fit the prophecies of a book they don't even read, but base their entire identity upon. The legacy of holy wars encompasses several critical dimensions. There's a cultural and architectural legacy. These wars have had profound influence on art, literature, and architecture. They've inspired magnificent structures like Europe's grand cathedrals and the stunning mosques of the Middle East. There are geopolitical consequences. Holy wars have redrafted borders, dismantled empires, and given rise to modern nation states. The political map of the world bears the imprint of these holy wars, and they've had significant impact on religious identities. These conflicts have played a pivotal role in shaping the religious identities of communities and their relations with one another. They've ignited religious fervor, influenced theological beliefs, and regrettably driven wedges between faiths while slaughtering innocent lives. And we dare to call these wars holy with the darkest sense of irony. And the concept of holiness and its interpretation varies across different religions and belief systems. In Christianity, holy refers to something or someone set apart or consecrated for sacred and divine purposes. It is associated with purity, righteousness, and the absence of sin. God is considered the ultimate holiness, and people, places, and objects can become holy through consecration or divine blessing. And in Islam, holy translates to haram, which means forbidden, or halal, permissible. It is often related to actions, behaviors, and objects that are sanctioned or prohibited by Islamic law, Sharia. Mecca and Medina, for example, are considered holy cities, and the Quran is a holy scripture. Now, holiness in Judaism signifies a state of being consecrated or set apart for a sacred purpose, and Jewish law and tradition emphasize rituals, ethics, and the observance of these commandments as a way to achieve holiness. The Torah, the Wailing Wall, and the Holy of Holies in the temple are considered holy. In Hinduism, the concept of holiness is closely tied to purity and the divine. Holy sites, rivers, and deities hold great significance. Many Hindus seek to achieve holiness through acts of devotion, meditation, and living a righteous life, ultimately aimed to attain moksha, which is liberation from the cycle of reincarnation. Buddhism views holiness as a state of spiritual purity and enlightenment. Holy places often have connections to the life of the Buddha, and relics and scriptures associated with Buddhism are considered sacred. Achieving holiness in Buddhism involves following the Eightfold Path and achieving nirvana. In Sikhism, holiness is linked to living a life of devotion, humility, and service. The Guru Granth Sahib, the central religious scripture, is considered holy, and Sikh places of worship are regarded as sacred. Achieving holiness involves following the teachings of the gurus and living in accordance with Sikh principles. And many indigenous and native belief systems have their own understanding of some kind of holiness. It is often associated with sanctity of nature, the spirits, and the land. Ceremonies, rituals, and sacred sites are integral to these concepts of holiness. But in my lifetime, holiness has proven to be nothing more than smoke and blood. Holiness is a delusion of grandeur and a world ruiner. All politics are identity politics because every damn war kills people. And every damn policy of every damn country prioritizes some narcissistic leader or some collective exceptional identity over the damn lives of people. The religion I once held was supposed to be about hoping for deliverance of pain, yet I can only recognize it now as a banner under which revenge is rejoiced in, bloodshed is blessed, imperialism is sanctioned and called removing impurities, and there is virtually no regard for the existence we are suffering through right now. And this is what cults do. They erase your empathy. They incite an unseen promise, and the cult followers end up perpetuating harm on scales they cannot even fathom themselves until they open their eyes. And in the aftermath of this recent conflict between Hamas and Israel, social media platforms have been inundated with a deluge of videos and images claiming to depict the situation, and these visuals have created a challenging environment for global onlookers to discern truth from falsehood. For example, a viral claim suggested that a high-ranking Israeli commander, Nimrod Alani, had been captured by Hamas during the attack. And this claim was debunked by the Israeli Defense Forces, which confirmed that Alani was seen in a video of Israeli military officials during the conflict. And then there was a fabricated memo circulating on social media, purportedly signed by President Joe Biden, announcing an $8 billion military aid package to Israel. And the White House has confirmed that that memo was fake, emphasizing that no such announcement has been made. The altered image seems to be based on an order issued from Biden for financial assistance to Ukraine. And an old video of people paragliding into a sports field was erroneously linked to Hamas attack on Israel. And the footage actually shows parachute jumpers in Cairo, Egypt. And it had been online since September, well before this recent conflict. And misleading captions attempted to portray it as evidence of Hamas fighters entering Israel. Then there's 2 videos featuring Russian President Vladimir Putin speaking about the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and it was misrepresented as recent warnings to the U.S. regarding the Gaza war. And the misleading captions and clips incorrectly portrayed Putin's statements. So it becomes hard, right? Like, what should you believe? And that's really not my job to tell you, but I will advocate for the reasons that I think there are things you should not believe. Believing that you are part of a chosen people is cult-like. It leads to a sense of superiority and exclusivity, which breeds intolerance and discrimination towards those who are not a part of your group. The belief in being chosen creates a narrow worldview that makes it challenging to empathize with or understand the experiences and perspectives of people from different backgrounds. This tunnel vision amplifies division and conflict. Beliefs like this will make you susceptible to rigid, authoritarian structure where questioning and dissenting voices are silenced or dismissed, or worse. Critical thinking and open dialogue are essential in any society to ensure that policies and practices are just and ethical. Occult adherence to the idea of being chosen throws away this process, and it hinders progress and just promotes unhealthy conformity. I'll also say this: taking a neutral stance, especially in conflicts, nowadays is often touted as cowardice or privileged in the current zeitgeist. And it is certainly pathetic to not stand up to bullies and to not condemn clear terrorism. But there is nothing cowardice or privileged about working towards peace and justice. And allow yourself to have a nuanced understanding of complex situations and avoid being swept up by the overwhelming divisive rhetoric and propaganda out there right now. Critically evaluate the actions of governments or institutions that exploit religious identity for political and social control. Governments that manipulate religious beliefs for their own agendas sow division, incite violence, and infringe upon the individual rights and freedoms of their citizens. In this era of unparalleled access to knowledge and reason, it is with an ardent plea that I address those still ensnared within the clutches of religious cults, and particularly the cult of Christianity. The world stands witness to the unending cycle of wars, fueled and justified by religious identity and zealous fervor, leaving humanity fractured and torn. I beseech you, Christians, to escape the illusionary bonds of your faith that perpetuate such dangerous ideologies. Religious cults are not defined by the size of their following, but by their ability to manipulate minds and control behavior. Whether you're a part of a small fringe group or a major world religion, the hallmarks of cultish behavior are all too evident. The cult of Christianity, in its various denominations, is wielded as a tool for those in power. Wake up to your unquestioning devotion to leaders and texts, a disdain for critical thinking and dissent, and an unwavering commitment to the group's beliefs. Christianity is no exception to the rule. The promise of salvation and eternal life is used to control and dominate the faithful, creating a sense of dependency on religious leaders. The Bible is wielded as a weapon of power, with passages cherry-picked and manipulated to support various agendas, especially in war. And we are seeing that right now. And one of the greatest dangers of religious cults, especially Christianity, lies in the readiness to align with those in authority who seek to harness religious identity to wage wars, from the Crusades of the Middle Ages to the ongoing Israeli-Arab conflict. Religious beliefs have been used as a pretext for violence and bloodshed. It is a testament to the manipulation and power of cult-like thinking within the realm of faith. The illusion of being God's chosen people has been an intoxicating poison throughout history. We must remember that such notions only serve to divide humanity further, creating an us versus them mentality that paves the way for conflict. It is the very cult belief in divine selection that fuels the flames of war and stifles the voices of reason and empathy. To escape this perilous cult mentality is to embrace reason. It is to reject the idea of being chosen in favor of the shared responsibility to protect the sanctity of life and our planet. It is to stand in defiance against those who exploit religion for political power and to reclaim our autonomy as free-thinking individuals. I implore you to break free from the cult of Christianity and its cultish tendencies. Shed the illusions, question the dogma, and liberate your mind from the trappings of war-mongering religious cults.
If you'd like to learn more about this podcast or other work I'm doing, go to thecultofchristianity.com. If you'd like to support this podcast, listen, follow, share, and consider subscribing for $5 through Spotify for additional content, or give as much or as little as you can to support this work through links in the show's notes. Every dollar helps further this important discussion as well as start other exciting projects. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep love in your life, hope in your heart, and searching in your soul.